So I finally got my hands on the Steam machine, and one of the first games I wanted to throw at it was Halo Campaign Evolved, because it's the latest big game to come out. It's the remake of the original Combat Evolved campaign, rebuilt in Unreal Engine 5, and that engine choice matters a lot for how this runs, because if you've watched my Steam Deck video on this game, you already know how unoptimized Unreal Engine 5 can be. Now what I'm doing here is pretty simple. I ran the high settings preset across 1080p, 1440p and 4K. And at 1080p I went in a bit deeper, testing both TSR and FSR, plus frame generation on top of FSR. So by the end of this video you're gonna see exactly how this game runs on the Steam machine, and I'm even going to give you where the actual sweet spot is. Now still trying to figure out the right template for these videos. It's probably going to differ a bit from my Steam Deck videos, so your feedback would be greatly appreciated. Tell me what you want to see tested and how you want the data presented with these videos. And if you have any questions about the Steam machine, post those below as well, because I'm going to be working on my full review video for that. Now we're starting with TSR at native 1080p, and as I said, this is on the high preset, and native of course is going to be the roughest for TSR. Usually with upscaling you're not really using native because, well, the reason to use upscaling is to just gain some performance. We're looking at 34, 35 FPS, 26 FPS for 1% lows, so it's not really great with TSR set to native. The image, however, looks pretty good. I'm testing this on my 1440p monitor, but yeah, it looks amazing. Next up, I have TSR set to medium, and we're already climbing in FPS here. I think here the average FPS is something between 47 to 55 FPS, with the 1% lows at around 34 FPS. In terms of image quality, it doesn't look any worse than it did on native. You really have to squint your eye to notice a difference. And then we have TSR set to low. This will look the worst out of the three, but we're getting a little bit more FPS, actually not that much more than we did on medium. We're looking at an average of 48 to 56 FPS, with the 1% lows being 42. So the 1% lows really improved. And next up I have the same preset, high preset, again 1080p with FSR set to native, and again here we're looking at around 32 FPS, so FSR set to native actually performs much worse than TSR. This wasn't the case on the Steam Deck, so this is surprising. But the 1% lows on FSR are actually better than those on TSR. FSR set to medium, we're looking at around 49 between 49 and 52 FPS on average. But the 1% lows are around 29-30 FPS, so not much improvement in that 1% lows from native to medium. I think it's probably most identical to TSR Medium. Now next I have FSR Medium again, however this time we have turned on the built-in FSR frame generation. The average nearly doubles and the 1% lows is at 72. Now that number looks great, and in a lot of scenes it actually feels smooth. The input latency underneath all that is still tied to that roughly 50 FPS base, so in the heavier firefights you can feel a little floaty. It's no different than using Frame Gen on the Steam Deck, but it makes more sense here because we're starting from a bigger FPS base. Honestly, it's not bad at all with the Frame Gen. If you guys are enjoying this breakdown and you want to see more Steam Deck and Steam Machine videos, consider subscribing to the channel. Okay, moving up to 1440p with FSR set to medium, we're looking at about 40 FPS with 38 FPS as the 1% lows. And this one surprised me a little. The average drops to 40, but look at the gap between the average and the 1% lows. It's pretty tiny. And that's why it feels smoother than the number alone suggests. It feels a lot more stable. And on my 1440p monitor, the game honestly looks just as good as it does in 4K. I think if I had to give you guys a sweet spot for this particular game, it would probably be some combination of medium and high settings set to 1440p with FSR set to medium. Now, in this game, FSR Medium is pretty much setting FSR to balanced. I think if we set some of the settings to medium, we can definitely hit 60 FPS and it will look pretty great. And if you want to throw FSR Frame Gen on top of that, you're actually gonna have a pretty good time. Now, this brings me to 4K, high preset, FSR Medium, and it's just not a good experience. You're looking at between 24, 26, 28 FPS, but when the firefighting gets really heavy, when there's a lot of enemies on screen with a lot of effects, it will drop down to 24 FPS, with the 1% lows being 24, 25 FPS. So it's really not a great experience. Personally, I don't think even 30 FPS would be what I'm targeting for the Steam machine. You know, on the Steam Deck, 30 FPS kind of feels alright for a lot of the games. You know, you're in handheld, you're looking at a smaller screen, but for this one, the living room experience, I am gonna be targeting 60 FPS for most of my recommendations for these games moving forward. So yeah, that's what we get with 4K at high settings. So while we're looking at this footage, I really want to talk about the Steam machine a little bit and my first impressions with it. And honestly, I think it's a pretty great device. I've only had a couple of hours with it now. I also tested some other games, and you're gonna see that in the upcoming days. I was really surprised at how small it is, even though I have a 3D printed one. It really is surprising. It is pretty hefty, however. It is, I think, maybe 4 kilos, something like that, maybe 3 or 4 kilos. I haven't really measured it, but it is pretty hefty. But it is very silent. The other thing I really noticed is that the actual usage of SteamOS on the Steam machine is a lot more smoother than the one on the Steam Deck. You just can navigate menus a lot faster. Switching between desktop and gaming mode is a lot faster. So yeah, really impressed so far. And performance wise, I'm gonna need to test a lot more games before I can give you my verdict. Now moving on to the last piece of footage I have. This is on the low preset. Again, 4K with FSR set to medium, and we're just barely covering that 30 FPS target. So yeah, we can even stretch it to 35, 37, even 40 FPS later on in this footage where there's not that much fighting. But yeah, the average does come up. But the thing is that the 1% lows with this, even at low preset, doesn't really budge. It stays at around 23, 24 FPS, which is kind of the same as the high preset. So dropping settings, it does give you a higher ceiling, but the stutters pretty much stay exactly where they are. This is why I'm gonna be including 1% lows with my test footage moving on, even on the Steam Deck, because it does show you if the game is running a lot more stable. We're not really looking at, yeah, it can hit that FPS number. We're gonna be looking at how stable it is overall. And at 4K, this thing is hitting a wall that even lower settings just doesn't fix. So for me, the Steam machine, at least with the latest, this is really the latest of the latest games, the Steam machine is not gonna be a 4K 60 FPS experience. Even with Frame Gen, I think the sweet spot for this machine for most games is gonna be 1440p or even 1080p. You never know. The Steam Deck, when it came out, it had a lot of improvement even on performance in the years after it came out. So maybe we're gonna be able to reach better numbers on some of these games later on, but I think 1440p is where Valve should have really advertised this. And at 1440p it looks great, even on a 4K monitor, on a 4K TV, I think 1440p looks amazing. So overall, that's gonna be it. If you wanted to play Halo on the Steam machine, I think 1440p with medium settings, with FSR set to balanced and medium, you're gonna have a good experience. You keep most of the visual quality, the 1% low stay nice and pretty tight, so it feels smooth without any stutters, and that's pretty much the setting I would recommend. That's gonna be it for this video. As I said, I'm still working on the format for these. Any suggestions are appreciated, and let me know what you wanna see with these videos. And if you guys enjoyed it, consider leaving a like. If you hated it, leave a dislike and let me know what I can do to improve. And if you're into Steam, Steam Deck, Steam hardware and gaming handhelds, consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.